Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about the former SEC chief, Lisa Braganca, exposing not only the hedge fund corruption, but also the SEC corruption as well. So stay tuned and let's make some money. And now I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, first off, I want to start by talking about exactly how the hedgies are manipulating the price of AMC using the options chain. This is a small thread by Nate that talks about exactly what form of options and swaps on top of the married and divorced puts that those hedgies are using and abusing. He says, so we're to believe that after paying off huge amounts of debt, restructuring, record ticket sales and the purchase of a gold mine, which by the way is up 600% in the last few weeks during inflation, AMC is down 32% in a single week. This type of rubbish is why people get annoyed. And he said, here's a reminder on how they do it. Hedge funds short AMC, GameStop and many other meme stocks. They use a synthetic return swap on top of married and divorced puts through the ETFs to hide that shorting. He said that's how we keep getting more and more shorts or more and more shares available to short magically appearing every single day. He said 6 years ago a 65-page paper was written with proof. So this is a paper titled Synthetic Shorting with ETFs written back in December 2016, long before the meme stock fiasco. And the introduction says, we provide novel evidence that arbitrators are using exchange-traded funds or ETFs as an avenue to circumvent short sale constraints at the stock level. And it says, we've documented that shorting activity on ETFs rises with the difficulty of shorting the underlying stocks. Stocks that are heavily shorted via their holding ETFs underperform those lightly shorted by 94 basis points per month. It says the return predictability of ETF short selling on individual stocks is distinct from short level shorting measures and is concentrated among stocks that face the most severe arbitrage constraints. Now, obviously, I'm not going to read this entire 65-page report to you, but effectively this report goes in depth and talks about how hedgies are shorting ETFs and then going long on the remaining stocks in that ETF to synthetically short individual stocks within those ETFs, aka AMC and GameStop, the ones that are hard to borrow where no shares are available for shorting. Because even though no shares of AMC are available for shorting, there are tons and tons of IWM and many other ETF shares available to short, and then all they have to do is go long on the other stocks inside that ETF, and it synthetically shorts AMC and GameStop. And Nate said, so we know it's happening, and Gary Gensler and the SEC have still not done a single thing about it. And he said, this stuff is going to get ugly. We wake up every day to this malarkey, while paid off Gary Gensler wakes up in his 1%er house. Now, as Lisa Braganca explains, there's actually a reason as to why Gary Gensler hasn't done anything about it, and likely won't. So Lisa Braganca tweeted saying, once again, Matt Levine is hilarious. If I were the director of the Elon Musk division at the SEC, I would absolutely go after him for that penalty money, because SEC folks prefer sexy cases that are straightforward. They don't like having to deal with complex options and phantom shares. If all the SEC has to do is log on to Twitter, go on to Elon Musk's Twitter page and look for any potentially market manipulative tweets, that's what the SEC love because they basically don't have to do anything. If the SEC are having to investigate complex options or phantom shares or synthetic return swaps or married and divorced puts, that's tons and tons of effort and tons of legwork that the SEC just tends to skip over. Now, there is a reason why the SEC purposefully skips over this hard work, and it's all due to the fact that the SEC is underfunded, and also the fact that the SEC is controlled by those higher powers that be. And she said that is the truth about most regulators. They have limited resources, and individual staff do not like to feel uninformed or dumb while doing an investigation. She said they also do not like to discover that their regulations are being abused by powerful market makers and powerful brokers. She says, while at the SEC, I personally spent a lot of time investigating and preparing a case against a powerful player in the marketplace. She said that player convinced the SEC powers that be to scuttle the case. I felt like I'd wasted hundreds of hours of my life. So therefore, even Lisa Braganca, a former SEC branch chief, had been investigating one of those major players, but had had her entire investigation scuttled. Now guys, many of you may not have a lot of confidence in the stock market at the moment. There's all of this market manipulation and market fraud that seems to be going entirely unpunished. And that's why I personally also invest in cryptocurrency, especially now that Bitcoin is starting to recover and starting to break out. I personally like to use BlockFi, and right now you can currently get up to $250 in free Bitcoin when you sign up to BlockFi using the link in the description below and make your first deposit. Obviously, you can buy tons of other forms of cryptocurrency on BlockFi and not just Bitcoin. More than 500,000 people and 350 institutions globally use BlockFi to manage over $10 billion in assets. BlockFi as a platform is also entirely free to use and requires no minimum balance. BlockFi also offers a rewards credit card with an introductory rate of 3.5% cashback on your purchases, also paid in crypto, so you can continue to accumulate more and more. There's also no annual fee and no foreign transaction fee either, and the card is currently available in the United States. So guys, be sure to sign up to BlockFi using the link in the description below to get up to $250 of free Bitcoin. And she says, so what does that mean? And how can the apes actually benefit and actually ensure that something is done? She said the SEC is more likely to do something if, number one, apes make manipulation easy to understand and effectively cut out the legwork for the SEC. If we can effectively remove those hundreds of hours of investigations that are required, it makes the SEC job easier, and it means that individual employees at the SEC won't feel dumb, and it means they won't end up wasting hundreds of hours because the work is already done. And she said, number two, provide documentation to the SEC in the way that the SEC likes to see it, just like submitting and documenting whistleblower tips. So basically, if we provide this information directly to the SEC in the way that they like to see it, aka not just leaving comments on random YouTube videos or random cryptic tweets, but by providing the information directly to the SEC via their submission policies, we could potentially have something done. There is obviously still a risk that the powers that be come down on that SEC investigation and effectively scuttle it once again, but I do believe if we make enough noise and bring enough awareness and make this stuff easy as possible to understand, that something will eventually be done. If we can turn things like synthetic shorting, naked shares, married and divorced puts, total return swaps, synthetic return swaps, and all of that complex jargon into regular, everyday speech and make it easy for the SEC to understand, it leaves them no choice but to perform an investigation and make some criminal arrests. Now, fortunately, Dave Lauer, an ex-Citadel trader, is already ahead of the curve and has created a letter to Gary Gensler that can be signed by you. He tweeted saying it's time to let the SEC know who we are and what we're about. The SEC responds to public pressure, and we need to let them know how many investors truly care about these issues. He said, read and sign our letter to Gary Gensler. Not only 2 hours later, he updated his tweet by saying this letter just crossed 10,000 signatures and the pace is accelerating. It's incredible to see how many people care about these issues, and this is going to have an impact. Thank you, hashtag we the investors. Now, not only an hour later, he said, incredible to see hashtag we the investors is now trending on Twitter as we close in on 20,000 signatures. If you believe in a simpler, fairer and more transparent market, help us send a message to the SEC that they need to act. Charles Payne also retweeted Dave's tweet, encouraging people to check it out and sign the petition, and at the time of making this video, it's now up to 34,000 signatures. Now you can even read the letter that Dave Lauer has constructed directly to Gary Gensler, and I think the most interesting part of this letter is that you can see every single one of the 34,000 signatures listed below. There's absolutely nothing that stops you from performing a Control-F search for names in this list, and I can assure you that as soon as I've finished recording this video, if you perform that Control-F search, you will absolutely see my name within this list. Now, even though Lisa Braganca is only just exposing the SEC corruption, it may already be too late for those hedgies. 741 Trey just tweeted saying that Ortex reports that GameStop's maximum borrow rate has just spiked to 75.45%. Now, this isn't the average borrow rate or the minimum borrow rate, this is the maximum borrow rate, but it shows that the GameStop borrow rate is still heavily increasing at a rapid pace. I don't think it will be long until the average borrowing rate, which I think is at the moment somewhere around 16% per Ortex, starts increasing towards this 75% number. Now, apparently Exempt thinks that we are now moving towards the fear stage of the cycle crash or the market crash. Now, you've probably seen this chart before that talks about the market cycle. You start here in the stealth phase, move over into the awareness phase, then the mania phase, and then the blow-off phase. You can see over hundreds and hundreds of years that the market basically follows this cycle of running up before a crash. It then recovers, moves sideways a bit, runs up again, and then there's another crash. Now in this you have multiple different forms of investor and you have multiple different emotions that come to play during the market cycle. At the start you have the smart money that appears in the stealth phase. Now these are obviously those controlling families of America and those controlling families of the world. Stocks then begin to recover from the previous crash, and you then have the institutional investors that start investing as well as the awareness builds. You have the first sell-off, which is obviously a bear trap because there's a quick recovery. You then have the mania phase where it gains tons and tons of media attention, aka when the meme stocks really took off and retail investing really took off at the start of January 2021. You then have the public investors coming in with the enthusiasm, the greed, the delusion, a new paradigm, some denial, a bull trap, a return to the normal, but then followed by fear, capitulation, and despair. Now, if you compare this chart to the S&P 500 over the last few years, and I'm going to swap between these charts very quickly, we can see that the S&P 500 is almost following this chart exactly. You have the stealth phase back here in 2013 and 2014 as we recovered from the 2008 recession. You then had the awareness phase running up to 2018 and 2019. You then had the pandemic when we gained media attention and the S&P 500 rocketed off. Right now everyone thinks we're returning to the norm after that March pump, and everyone thinks the market will not be crashing and they will be setting new all-time highs in the next few weeks. But obviously, as apparently Exempt explains, we're now moving towards that fear part of the cycle, and then capitulation, and then despair. Now, one person that does not seem too worried about the coming market crash and the SEC corruption is Ryan Cohen, who's just tweeted another meme about BCG. I think Ryan Cohen is not worried about the BCG consultants, he's not worried about the hedgies or the market makers or the SEC corruption, because he knows that it's already too late for them and that GameStop and AMC are going to squeeze. Guys, be sure to let me know down in the comments below what you think about the former SEC chief, Lisa Braganca, exposing the SEC corruption. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my others. Alternatively, subscribe to the channel and ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers.